Hello, welcome back to the Sworn Statement Podcast. As I told you in the introduction, today we're talking about a very interesting topic, a topic that affects everyone because we all have them. We're talking fingerprints. And with us right now are members of our identification section of CCSO's Forensics Services Bureau. That's a mouthful. I hope I said it right. Yes. First, we'll ask Leanne Whitney Hubble, the supervisor of the identification section. Did I say all that correctly?
You sure did.
Excellent. And then one of our latent print examiners, we have Arenia Borowski. How are you?
Doing great, thank you.
First off, just tell me in a nutshell, for the listeners, for the viewers, how do you describe what you do when you meet somebody at a party, in an elevator? What's your elevator pitch on the identification section?
So basically, any fingerprints that come in to our office from crime scenes, we are the people that examine them and enter them into APHIS and hopefully make identifications on those to help catch the bad guys.
That's right. So a crime happens, maybe a theft, a grand theft, somebody steals a car, they pick up the prints, they bring them to you, and then what? You're comparing them to fingerprints we already have on file to identify suspects?
That's correct, Adam. So we will put them into our database, and then our database will give us back a list of candidates, and we will manually compare them to see if we can make an identification.
Excellent. Before we get all into that, tell me a little bit about yourselves. I'll start with you, Leanne. How long you been at the sheriff's office? How long you been in the ID section?
I have been here at CCSO for 26 years.
Wow.
I have been in the identification section for 15 of those years. I originally started off in communications. I was also a community service deputy, and then I did some time in crime scene before I came here.
And then E, how about you? How long you been at the sheriff's office? What else have you done here?
So I started with the sheriff's office in September of 2012. I, like Leanne, also started in communications, and then I transferred over to crime scene. I was a crime scene investigator previously, so I missed it. And then I transferred over to the identification section. I've been doing that for 4 years now.
That's interesting. You guys were both in crime scene. We'll get into that a little bit later because I'm sure that helps you in your roles right now. Before we do, break it down at a base level. This is going to be a really stupid question, but you have to explain it to me like I'm a third grader. What is a fingerprint? I know that sounds silly, but explain to me what a fingerprint is and why they are so important to solving crimes.
Absolutely. So a fingerprint is technically the friction ridge skin on the ends of your fingers and on your palms and actually on the soles of your feet as well. So a latent print is a chance impression of that friction ridge skin on a surface. Not every time you touch something will you in fact leave a fingerprint behind. So that's an important thing to note. And then we do those examinations of the latent prints to what we would refer to as a standard fingerprint or an inked fingerprint, which are the fingerprints taken with ink on a fingerprint card or in a digital format like a live scan device.
So E, as we said, you guys are both latent print experts. That means the latent prints are the ones, like we said, that are at crime scenes that are hidden that somebody has to kind of lift off and discover at a crime scene.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you kind of broke it down. Just explain to me your day-to-day. You're physically looking. Start with you're putting the fingerprints into a database, like Leanne said, and then you still have to physically eyeball them and look at them and compare them.
Basically, we are using a method in order for us to make a decision in the end. Are these two fingerprints made by the same source? Did they come from the same source?
And every person has a unique fingerprint?
That's correct. And so the reason for that is because we cannot recreate the same environment when our fingerprints are created. And that's why they're different, because no two people who, during their development in their mother's belly, are ever going to have the same environment. So when fingerprints are starting to develop, when you're in your parents' belly, then it's going to be different. So.
And how? But I have to imagine there's been billions of people born that some are very similar. Do you ever run into that where fingerprints are really similar, and how hard is that to kind of tell them apart?
Yeah, so that's why there's latent print examiners.
Yeah.
We ultimately, using our training and experience, can come up with a conclusion as to whether or not those two prints are the same.
So, Leanne, take me through a hypothetical case. What happens? Crime scene investigators on scene and they find fingerprints. What happens next?
So they would be dusting for fingerprints, at which point, if they find prints that they would like to obtain, they will either photograph them or obtain them with lift tape and put them on a fingerprint card. They would then submit them to us here in the identification section. And we would initially start by looking at those latent prints and determining whether or not we can even work with them. There has to be a sufficient amount of information to be able to make an identification. So as you can imagine, latent prints are very rarely an entire fingerprint. You know, they're going to be smudged, they're going to be partial prints 9 times out of 10. So we need to evaluate that initial latent print to see if we can even work with it. If we cannot, unfortunately, it's set aside and we don't do anything else with it. If we can work with it, we would then enter that latent print into AFIS, which is the Automated Fingerprint Identification System. And it would give us back a list of candidates for us to do a manual comparison to. And if we don't make an identification based off that candidate list, then it will stay in the system in hopes that it would maybe hit against a future arrest. But it stays on file with us, and perhaps the detective will come up with a person of interest that they would like us to do a manual comparison to later on down the line, and we can do that.
The AFIS you mentioned, is that our internal system? Is that the Collier County Sheriff's Office, or is that a larger database?
So AFIS is a universal system. However, each individual agency will have their own local section of it. So ours would just be for the Collier County records, and then there'll be the FDLE level, which would be the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. And then it can go as far as the FBI level. So it can go local, state, and national.
And we have access to all those? You're able to compare into all those different sections of the databases?
Yes.
Excellent. Tell me what other kind of, because you work with different parts of the agency. You were telling me before we began, it's just not crime scene people, it's the jail, it's warrants. Tell me about all the other things that you guys do, all the other parts of the agency you work with.
That's correct, Adam. We actually work rather closely, obviously, to our sisters and brothers from the Crime Scene Bureau, our Major Crimes Unit. So we help or we assist a lot with the identification of bodies that might be decomposed or that the medical examiner would like us to positively identify. We also work with the jail. So when somebody is booked at the jail and their fingerprints are entered into the database, we have to ensure that the information that we have is correct and that the fingerprints do belong to that person. We also work with warrants. We work with our records unit.
How do you work with warrants? Is it just identifying someone that may or may not have a warrant against them or out for them?
That's correct. So we have to ensure that the warrant is for said person. So.
How foolproof is it? You know, like we said, all fingerprints are unique, but you may not have a full print that you're comparing it to.
So the comparison of what we call 10 prints. So 10 prints are the captured ink prints of all 10 fingers. That's usually something that's controlled. So we have the full print. We're going to have
You're going to have
full impression.
Right.
Yeah.
So 10 print to 10 print is a different examination than a latent print to a 10 print.
Got it.
So when we are comparing fingerprints for the warrant section, typically they have the full impression.
Okay.
So that makes it a little bit easier to do the comparison. Yes.
And Leanne, you had mentioned to me, you guys go to court, right? You have to defend these,
yes.
defend your findings. Tell me a little bit about that. What
Absolutely.
happens when you do that?
So part of the methodology that we use is called the ACE-V process. So that stands for analysis, comparison, evaluation. And the evaluation comes in where we make the determination of whether or not something is in fact an identification. And if we do identify someone, Yes, absolutely. If it's going through the court system, then we have to go in and we have to essentially prove our case. Tell the members of the jury and the court our findings, like what we did to get those findings, and basically everything I'm telling you right now. We have to give them the breakdown of fingerprint science in a nutshell so that they understand what I'm even talking to them about. And then, of course, the very end of it is the verification process. So every single ID that comes out of our section is verified. And that is the standard practice for all fingerprint examiners. Every identification is verified, if not double or triple verified, depending on the case.
Is that nerve-wracking to go in court, or are you guys used to it by now? I'd get a little nervous.
Well, I just wanted to add, and it's verified by another examiner as well. So,
Oh, gotcha.
so two people have to look at
okay.
the identification.
Excellent. How about you, E? Have you got to go into court as well?
Oh yeah. So anytime that we make an identification that it's going to go to court, then the examiner or the verifier sometimes will be.
So you have to have confidence in this because you have to go out there and defend it. So you have to feel pretty good about it when you make that ID.
Oh yes.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Let's talk about like a specific case. I know you guys brought one that really kind of touched you and one that, proved all the good things that we can do. Tell me about that. I know you had spoke about it before, so why don't you start? Tell me about the case that, sticks out in your mind.
As I mentioned before, we do help our major crimes unit with identifying human that are maybe decomposed to the point where it's just very difficult for us to identify. So in 1976, a body was located in one of the L canals on Alligator Alley. It was ruled to be a homicide, and at the time, we weren't able to make an identification. In 1976, technology was very different.
Yeah.
So a lot of the records were still on paper or on cards that had not been entered into the automated fingerprint identification system. So when it was searched, they weren't able to identify the body. While we were working on some of the cold cases and it was re-entered, we were able to identify that victim. And we were then able to contact the family and let them know that we were able to locate their family member and bring them home.
And this was pretty recently, right? Just within the past 18 months?
Yes.
So how did that make you guys feel? Well, first off, take me back to the identification. So they found this body in 1967, 1976.
Correct.
Didn't know who he was. They took his fingerprints. And then, like you said, the technology wasn't there to put them in a database and scan it. So we just have held on to it, and we were just kind of going back and checking them against prints we've had on file.
Right, absolutely. So any type of major case, homicide as an example, we will always hold on to that case file. So, as just a common thing that we do in the office, we will periodically rerun cold cases. And this one happened to be assigned to E, and she reran the prints, and that's when she was able to make that identification.
And how's that make you guys feel? I gotta imagine that's one of those good stories that makes it all worth it.
Definitely, we were very touched by the victim's sister, who was very moved by the fact that now they had some answers to what had happened to her sibling. Unfortunately, their mother had since passed away and was not able to get that closure, but she was able to get that closure for herself, to find out what happened to her brother. So she was very grateful and thankful to CCSO and to the detective and the examiners. So we were very moved by that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Tell me a little bit about the work and why you guys enjoy it. Leanne, you said you've been doing, I believe, 15 years in the ID section.
Yes.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
It's got to be something you like, and we can tell you're both passionate about it. Just
Yes.
Why do you enjoy this work?
So when I had my time in crime scene, I was maybe a little bit of a rarity because I enjoyed working property crimes and processing evidence for fingerprints. So when I had the opportunity to move over to the ID section, it made perfect sense to me because I just found them so incredibly interesting. And I picked it up very quickly. It's something that not everyone has an eye for.
Sure.
So I gravitated towards it, and I excelled pretty quickly in the science. And I really enjoy being able to figure out what happened and who touched what, who is at that scene, or who is that unidentified person, to help give closure to the families and to victims that maybe had their homes burglarized, and hopefully find some justice for them.
Absolutely. What about you, E? What brings you back every day? Why do you like this job?
I just to echo some of the things that Leanne said. I think it's really neat to be able to help the community get answers to a lot of these cases. Homicide cases that we're able to close, or being able to identify bodies or victims. We're able to have that connection to our community as well. So it helps to drive us every time that we come in and there's a new case that lands on our desk. It's a challenge. Are we going to be able to make an identification to help this person? So.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And everyone here at the Collier County Sheriff's Office, that's always our goals. Pushing forward that motto of ours of protecting the people of Collier County and their rights and their property. And you guys, obviously, you have a big hand in that and identifying.
Yes.
So it's got to feel good when you do that.
Absolutely.
Leanne, I want to go back to something you said. You mentioned just being on a crime scene and who touched this and who was here.
Sure.
Tell me about that, because I imagine at a crime scene, some crime scenes, there's just fingerprints everywhere and they got to be overlapping. I mean, how difficult is that to separate fingerprints, to pick up clean ones?
Absolutely. So you could definitely have what we would refer to as like a cluster of fingerprints. So as the crime scene investigator, you're going to kind of look at the overall picture and try to make your best determination on how you want to obtain those prints. So 9 times out of 10, they're obtained with lift tape and put on a fingerprint card. So you want to try to keep as much information together as possible. I mean, obviously, you don't want to put tape right down the middle of what you're looking at that's probably a handprint, right? That would be bad. So it is their responsibility to try to piece together things and keep them together as one unit, but we can work around that. I mean, with our training, we're pretty accustomed to working with very messy situations at times. Yeah. So that just adds to the challenge for us. But with the crime scene investigators, it's training and experience with them as well, and they can just eyeball it and know what they need to do in terms of collecting it.
Yeah. How about your experience in crime scene, both of you? E, how does that help you now? Do you feel that your background in CSI, how does that help you now with the ID section?
Oh, tremendously. It gave me a lot of experience in terms of being able to identify why we might have distortion in fingerprints. Surfaces are all different, and the things that people touch and how they touch it. Being in crime scene gave me a different understanding as to why that fingerprint looks that way. So as a latent print examiner, I understand now, like, okay, this print is distorted, but it's on this type of surface, and this was used to process that item. So now I can understand why there's distortion in it.
Yeah. At the beginning, you said that not only do we have fingerprints, we have them on our toes. We have toe prints. I did not know that. I heard that. Has that ever come into play? Have you ever had
Absolutely.
to? Really?
Yes.
I'm putting you on the spot. Can you
okay.
think of a time when someone picked up toe prints? Do we keep toe prints in the database?
Okay, so we do not keep them in the database. So everyone's free from that. But yes, more often than not, they're found in homicide cases. Typically, like, floor surfaces are not processed during burglaries, right? And how often do we see barefoot burglaries, right?
Yeah.
But unfortunately, in homicide, that kind of stuff happens more often where it's a home environment. So, yes, we would compare those. What we would have to do in that instance, though, is via a search warrant, we would have to obtain any person of interest's footprints to do a comparison.
You have to go out and get it because, like you said, we
Correct.
don't keep them on file, which makes sense. We have a big enough database. And while I mentioned that, Tell me about that. You had said we just upgraded our AFIS, the Automated Fingerprint
Identification System.
All
Yes.
right, AFIS. So tell me about upgrading it. What does that do for us?
So, we were previously on a server-based AFIS, which meant we had to upgrade every 6 to 7 years to stay in front of the latest technologies. Because if you don't do those upgrades in a timely fashion, you start to fall behind. And the systems, the technology just keeps getting greater and greater. So we would be missing out on a lot of potential identifications through AFIS if we're not keeping our systems up to date. So with this last upgrade that we did, we actually moved to the cloud environment, which means we never have to upgrade again, which is fabulous. So that means that pretty frequently, I would say every few months, they're pushing out new updates for us to the system, which means we are always on top of the latest technology, which is such a pertinent thing to have in terms of making positive identifications in our cases.
You know, that's a big deal. The sheriff always pushes that. We love the latest law enforcement technology.
Yes.
You look at our ROC upstairs, our real-time operations center. How much does that help? How much has technology, just in the few years you've been doing it, how has it gotten easier? I assume it's getting better all the time, and we're able to identify fingerprints better, keep them better, store them better, analyze them better.
Absolutely. So the way we capture fingerprints in terms of the booking process is different now. So the quality of those fingerprints is much better. That gives us more information. It gives us a more of an opportunity to make an identification because we have more information from that print. We go as far as, if it's captured correctly, we can go as far as seeing the pores in a ridge in the fingerprint. So even that is big, and we are also able to better to use technology to enhance fingerprints, so we can see them better, and it just gives us more information to be able to make our identifications.
Yeah, that's great. When we were talking earlier about a crime scene and just how kind of messy it can be, people touching this, people touching that, what should someone do? Say someone breaks into the house, someone attempts to steal their car, steal something out of their car, we want to lift prints. What advice would you give to someone that's maybe a victim of a crime to kind of avoid that?
Absolutely. So my number one piece of advice is, please don't touch anything.
Yeah.
Please. I know that people's instinct is to rifle through their belongings. Oh my gosh, what was taken? But please don't touch anything, because that can disturb any latent prints that were left behind by the suspects. And we don't want to have your prints overlapped over them or destroy them. So that would be my biggest word of advice, is to just don't touch anything.
And when that happens, when a property crime happens, do we then get the fingerprints of the victim so we can eliminate their fingerprints from the scene?
Yes, in theory we should. Sometimes it doesn't work out that way for one reason or another, but yes, that is absolutely a benefit for us.
That's excellent. That's all great information and very interesting. I didn't know a lot about this. I told you, Leanne, before you guys came in that I was coming in kind of blind, but you guys did a great job explaining to it and how important this is. All right, thank you guys again for joining us, and thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next time.